Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for numbers 2nd through 8th. This week I read 2 books, I watched 2 shows, I watched 1 movie, and I listened to 3 books. First this week we have Eat the Ones You Love. When I first heard about this, I was told it was a retelling of Little Shop of Horrors, and I was all in on that. Then when I actually opened the book, I realized that it took place in Dublin, which made me very excited because I lived there for a year. Because I lived there for a year, I was picturing a very particular shopping center while this book was going on, because the majority of this book takes place in the shopping center where this florist shop happens to be. And I know I'm picturing the wrong one because this is a shopping center on the north side, but I was a south sider and I worked at Dundrum, so that was the shopping center I was picturing. The other selling feature of this book is it's queer, so I was like, okay, a queer retelling of Little Shop of Horrors, let's get on that. And this was queer, and we spent a lot of time caring more about that aspect than the fact that there is a plant that actually kills people. So in this book we're following our main character, and she recently broke up with her very long-term boyfriend, so she's back living in the family home and she needs to get a job in order to get herself out of that situation. She was also made redundant as a graphic designer, and she can't seem to find any work in that field, at least not in Dublin. One day she's walking by this florist shop and it has a help needed sign in the window, and she's carrying her groceries, and she goes in anyway and asks this woman, who she finds very attractive, what kind of help she needs. From there we find out that this book is actually narrated by this plant that we come to find out is named Baby, because most of the time it's in third person, so she did this and she did that or whatever, but every once in a while it switches into first person, and then you remember that Baby is basically watching anyone who is around anything that is a part of them. So for example, this main character takes a bouquet of flowers home, and in that bouquet is a very small part of this plant which has killed before and will kill again. Although I liked this setup and overall I liked this book, there was this narrative tension that was kind of missing, because we knew this plant killed people in the past and we're seeing these past instances of that happening. When you think back to the original Little Shop of Horrors, a lot of the big tension from that was the morality of whether or not you should actually feed this plant, and because we're seeing all these things in flashbacks, we're not actually living those experiences, and many people came here for the man-eating plant, we're not really getting that. Sure, eventually something along those lines actually happens, but this book is much more focused on, will the main character choose her really hot boss or this new friend she's made at the mall? And then we have these weird interludes from this botanist who is working on the other side of the country, and she's sending letters to somebody in this friend group. And I'm not sure all of that was completely successful. That being said, I did enjoy this, I just don't think it was the best thing I've ever read. There were also a few lines throughout that I thought were definitely musical references to other musicals, which I enjoyed, but I have no idea if those were actually put there on purpose. I hope they were, but I have no idea. The other book I read with my eyeballs this week is a book that actually comes out this week, and that's My Roommate from Hell. This book is about Owen. He's going off to college, so he's leaving home for the very first time, and there's a lot of conflicted feelings because he's really excited to be going to this college. The campus looks amazing. He's very excited for the program he's going to be taking because he knows that's going to be able to get him to a really high-paying job, and then he'll be set up for life. However, he was supposed to be going with his best friend, and his best friend actually got pregnant recently, is staying closer to home for the pregnancy so that when the baby is born she has more of a support network, so he's missing his best friend. And, oh my god, be a voice that's not annoying. And relatively recently, the people of Earth found out that there is another dimension that is called Hell. It looks a lot like the hell that we learned about from like religion and things, but it's actually not connected in any way. This plays a big part because they're having the first ever exchange between Earth and Hell, so somebody is actually coming to his university, the Prince of Hell, and then a student from this university is actually going to do a semester in Hell. So he figures at some point he's probably going to spot this Prince of Hell when he's on campus, but it turns out it's actually his roommate. From there, many shenanigans ensue. Some of them are regular teenage boy first time out of the house type shenanigans, like people hooking up, which is totally fine, just don't do it while I'm in the room, please. And, you know, certain entities from hell just kind of hanging out in the dorm room. Not the best thing for sleeping, honestly. This is also very much one of the books where you can tell characters are really attracted to the main character, but he doesn't really have much dating experience. In fact, he has 0 dating experience, so he thinks that people are just being nice when they talk to him, not actually flirting at him purposefully. Which, you know, actually relatable. This was a fun come on get together already type of romance with a side of random adventures. As for the shows I watched this week, I watched the latter half of the first series of Happy Valley. Obviously this section, as people are closing in on trying to figure out what's happening with this crime case, definitely things got ramped up. And it seems like this particular storyline is wrapped up by the end of this series, so I'm interested to see what the next series is going to hold in terms of storyline. Especially because these characters are very, very compelling, and I'm interested to see how they'll play out in a completely different case. We also watched the penultimate episode of the 20th series of Taskmaster, and as always, this is just a lot of fun. Something I also really appreciate is Taskmaster actually puts out these outtake episodes, so there's these moments that just didn't make it into the cut for time, but are pretty funny, and those are fun to find on YouTube. We watched all of those in the past couple of weeks as well. There's 3 of them. As for the movie we watched this week, that was Good Fortune. All I knew going into this movie was the main cast was Seth Rogen, Keanu Reeves, and Aziz Ansari, and I went, yes, I don't even care what this is, I want to watch it. So in this movie we're first following Aziz's character, and he is working a lot of different gigs. He's trying to get ahead, but he's actually sleeping in his car. Life is really hard. He ends up doing this task for this really rich guy played by Seth Rogen, and he's like, hey, if you need a personal assistant, we could try this out and I could definitely do this because look how good I did this one task for you. And he's like, yeah, sure, let's try it out, why not? Unfortunately, this first character makes a little bit of a mistake. He ends up getting fired from this job as well, and he's just like, this completely sucks. As this is going on, the whole time there's this angel watching the situation, which is Keanu Reeves. And he really wants to help out. He has kind of this little job. He is the angel of texting and driving, so basically he's stopping people from doing that before they end their own lives by doing something silly. But he figures he can help in a bigger way. And he figures that this one guy is a lost soul, so he wants to show him what his life would be like if he switched places with the rich guy. And it turns out he doesn't really want to switch back because money solves a lot of problems. This movie is silly, it has some very poignant points to it. It also has Sandra Oh in it, so I was very excited when I saw her name show up. And altogether, I would recommend it. As for the books I listened to this week, the first one is Magpie Murders. This one is interesting because it's written in 2 different stories, if you will. You get this part at the very beginning in the prologue where this woman is talking about how she's an editor for this very famous novelist, and one day she sits down to read this book that kind of ruins her life. From there, we're actually reading that book. And it's a whodunit book, so you're trying to figure out who possibly killed somebody in this book. And then you get mostly to the end and then realize there's a couple chapters missing, and we go back to that first perspective where she's trying to figure out where are the last few chapters to this book, and oh yeah, something in life happens that she has to solve to try to figure out where those chapters are. And it turns out that a lot of the names and kind of characters that are in this book seem to have a basis in the real life people that this author knows. So from here, she's trying to solve crimes left, right, and center, whether or not they're in fiction or whether or not they're in real life. I found this incredibly fascinating because you're basically getting to the end of a story and then you're almost getting to the point where you're like, oh, of course so-and-so did it. But that's interrupted by trying to figure out all this other stuff, which is equally compelling. And you never know if something is a coincidence or you have to suspect somebody because their character in the book should be suspected. I thought this was very cool. Apparently there is also a 1-series TV show adaptation of this, which I'm going to have to watch at some point. The second book I listened to this week is Dream on Ramona Riley. This is the first in the Clover Lake series, which is not the same series as Bright Falls, but is definitely in the same universe because one of the characters from that universe definitely shows up in this one. She was mentioned early on and I got very excited and I was like, ooh, maybe we'll get a cameo, and then we did, and I was very excited about it. This one takes place in the very small town of Clover Lake, and our main character is Ramona. You might have been able to guess from the title. And her upbringing was a little bit out of the ordinary because when she was 13 and her younger sister had recently been born, her mother just up and left the family. So she had a really big hand in raising her sister up until she went off to university, and then while she was at university, her father actually ended up in a tragic accident. He survived, but he also needed a lot of help to get through because he had a broken leg and he couldn't do his own job anymore because he owned a landscaping business. So he had to retrain to go into teaching, something that he would be able to do once the leg was healed. And she ended up going back to the small town permanently, helping to raise her sister and never continuing her education in fashion design. As we're meeting this character and kind of getting to know her, we find out that there's going to be a movie movie shot in their very small town, and in fact some of the scenes are going to take place in the cafe that she actually works at. And one of the people playing one of the main characters is Dylan, who is our other point of view character. Dylan is an actress and she's the only child of rock stars from the 90s, so her parents are very famous. She didn't have a great upbringing because they were doing a lot of illegal rock star type things while they were on tour and she was a baby. And even though they've been sober for quite some time now, she still has a lot of anger to do with this, especially because the paparazzi always paint her in the worst light ever. And honestly, she's just sick of being seen as that bad girl, so she's actually been cast in this movie to play the lead in this queer romance, and she's so excited for it. She also has a history of people getting close to her to take advantage of her connections, and that's just not great whatsoever. Now, not only are these characters going to meet in this small town, they've actually met before, back when each of them were about 13 years old, and although they never exchanged their real names, Ramona definitely remembers this situation. Unfortunately, when Dylan shows up in her cafe to train to become a waitress so she looks more natural in the film, she doesn't immediately recognize Ramona, which is quite a blow. But Ramona, being one of the most kind-hearted people of all time, doesn't say anything about it, because why would you? She feels like she's forgettable anyway. I mean, look, her own mom left her, so she's got some hang-ups about that. Also, if she's going to be around this production, there's a chance that she'll actually run into the person that's running the costuming, who is actually one of her inspirations for studying apparel design in the first place. And since her sister is about to go off to university, she could definitely change careers at this point. This is one of those books where it's set up so well that if you've read romance books before, you know exactly what the pain points are going to be for these characters. But that being said, thinking you know what's going to happen and actually seeing things happen are two completely different things, and this was incredibly enjoyable. I cannot wait to see the next book, because I know who the main character is going to be of that one because the cover and the title are already out, and I'm excited to see what happened in her past because we get a little taste of it and how she moves on in the future. The other audiobook I listened to was My Lovely Wife. I finished this yesterday and I was actually sitting in the car as we were going somewhere, kind of listening to it really closely because I didn't have my headphones, but I only had 4% of the book left when we had to leave for this event, and I just wanted to know how it was going to end. This book starts out in such a way where you really hate the main character, because within the first chapter you find out that he likes to play this character and pretend that he's deaf in order to get women into bed, and then you realize that he's actually a family man, he's got a wife at home. So not only does he pretend to have a disability, but he's also using that to cheat on his wife, which is just like scum of the earth behavior. And then you realize that him and his wife are much, much worse than that. It turns out that something they like to do together is stalk a woman and kidnap her and end her life. You know, totally normal date night situation. And they somehow managed to do this with 2 young teens at home. From the outside, they look like a perfectly normal couple. They're living in the town that he grew up in. He teaches tennis lessons, she's in real estate. They get by okay. Both of their kids are in private school. But then all of a sudden, one of the bodies of the women that they were supposed to kill together, but he had to leave because his daughter was sick. So he thought his wife killed like a year ago, shows up, and it turns out that she didn't die a year ago, she died a few weeks ago. So, you know, he's got to talk to his wife about that. What's going on? This book is very twisty, and there were certain parts of this where I was like, oh, I can see the little thing that this character isn't seeing, and I can see how this is going to go really, really badly. And you don't really want these characters to get away with what they're doing, but it kind of has the Dexter effect where because you're seeing it through their perspective, you're like, oh, okay, I kind of want you to get away with things because you are not the most culpable for these crimes, but at the same point you're like, well, if you guys weren't doing the killing, this wouldn't be a problem. Like, why? What's also interesting is there's these certain things on the news that are definitely affecting their daughter, and he absolutely hates that, and yet his wife is kind of more cold toward that situation. This got very dark and twisty, and I needed to finish it quickly because my hold was about to lapse, but I think I would have finished it just about as quickly if that weren't the case. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!